Returning home after a long day at work, Martha sighed in relief as she closed the door behind her. The sensation of taking off her shoes and walking barefoot across the cool hallway floor brought a welcome comfort to her tired feet. "Lucas, where are you, my love?" she called, but there was no answer. Confused, she went to the kitchen, where she found a hastily written note on a sheet of paper, in the messy handwriting of her 8-year-old son. "Mom, I'm in my room, I don't want dinner." Martha frowned. Lucas never refused dinner. Feeling a tightness in her chest, she hurriedly took the stairs 2 at a time, worried about what might be happening. Something was definitely not right. When she reached Lucas's bedroom door, she knocked softly before saying, "Lucas, can I come in?" "I'm coming in, okay?" She opened the door slowly and in the dim light, saw her son huddled in the corner of the room between the bed and the wall. Her heart sank even more. "Honey, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Martha knelt beside him, trying to comfort him. Lucas looked up, his eyes red and swollen from crying, but he shook his head tightly, refusing to speak. "I don't want to talk about it," he said, his voice shaking with fear. Martha's heart broke. "You know you can tell me anything, don't you? Whatever it is, we'll work it out together." But Lucas continued to shake his head, more vehemently this time. "I can't, he'll kill me if I tell him." Martha froze. "Who, Lucas? Who's going to hurt you?" Trying to hide his face, the boy whispered, "No one forgets." But Martha gently held his face, looking directly into his eyes. "No one's going to hurt you, I'm your mother and I'm here to protect you. Please tell me what's wrong." Lucas began to shake and his eyes filled with tears again. It's Ernesto." The words came out with difficulty, but when they finally reached Martha's ears, she felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "Ernesto? Lucas's stepfather. What's wrong with Ernesto, Lucas?" With a pained look, Lucas looked away. "He hurts me when you're not here." Martha shook her head in disbelief. It couldn't be true. Ernesto always seemed to love Lucas. She couldn't imagine something like this happening. "Ernesto loves you, Lucas." "This can't be true," she whispered, still processing what she had just heard. But before she could continue, Lucas shouted, "No! You never believe me." He pulled away abruptly, his eyes full of pain. "That's why I didn't want to tell you anything." Martha tried to get closer, reaching out to him. "Lucas, wait." Before she could finish her sentence, Lucas got under the covers, turning his back to her, clearly not wanting to talk anymore. Martha stayed there, kneeling beside the bed, feeling her mind spinning in a whirlwind of thoughts. This couldn't be true. Ernesto had always been a good man. He treated her with such affection, always being kind to Lucas, or at least that's what it seemed like. But now, with her son's words echoing in her mind, a seed of doubt began to form. Slowly, she stood up, feeling the weight of uncertainty on her shoulders. She left Lucas's room silently, closing the door softly behind her. Walking down the stairs, she could barely think straight. Her feet carried her automatically to the kitchen, where she poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the glass. How could this be happening? She had been with Ernesto for 2 years, and during all that time she believed she knew him. He had always been so affectionate with her, so attentive. So why was Lucas saying these things? Doubt gnawed at her insides, and her heart clenched in fear of what she might discover. The sound of the front door opening suddenly pulled her from her thoughts. "Honey, I'm home." Ernesto's cheerful voice echoed through the hallway, making her jump. Martha took a deep breath, trying to regain her balance. She needed to act normally, at least until she found out the truth. She couldn't let Ernesto know that something was wrong. A moment later, he walked into the kitchen with his usual smile on his face. "How was your day, love?" he asked, leaning in to kiss her. Instinctively, Martha took a step back, avoiding his touch. Ernesto's smile faltered for a second. "Is everything okay?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Martha forced a smile, trying to sound as natural as possible. "I'm fine, I'm just tired. It's been a long day." Ernesto frowned, clearly worried. "Do you want me to order dinner so you don't have to cook?" He always looked so solicitous. But Martha, still avoiding his gaze, shook her head. "No thanks. I'm not hungry." The silence hung between them, tense. "Actually," she said, trying to sound nonchalant, "I think I'll go to bed early tonight." Ernesto watched her for a moment, still suspicious. "Are you sure everything's okay?" He reached out to touch her shoulder, but again Martha recoiled. "Yeah, I just need to rest," she replied, her voice shaking, trying to hide the tumult of emotions that were taking over her. Ernesto nodded, but doubt seemed to be beginning to creep into his eyes. Martha was on her way to the door when she heard Ernesto's voice behind her. "Good evening, wait," he said, making her stop for a moment. "Where's Lucas?" I bought him something and wanted to show him. His words made her freeze. Martha's hand hovered on the doorframe as her heart raced. He's already asleep. He wasn't feeling well today. What a shame. Should I go see him? See how he's doing? Ernesto suggested, his voice thick with concern. Before she could stop herself, Martha blurted out, "No," more quickly and urgently than she had intended. Catching the abrupt tone, she turned and saw the confusion on Ernesto's face. Trying to hide it, she quickly added, "I mean, let him rest. You can see him tomorrow." Without waiting for an answer, Martha hurried upstairs, closing the bedroom door behind her. She threw herself onto the bed, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. Confusion and fear overwhelmed her. What was she supposed to do now? How to deal with the situation? The next few days would be a real torment. Every time Ernesto interacted with Lucas, Martha watched him with extra attention, trying to identify any sign that something was wrong. However, everything seemed so normal. Ernesto continued to be the attentive and patient man she knew, dealing with Lucas's occasional tantrums with admirable calm. Still, something bothered her deeply. Martha noticed that Lucas had become quieter, more reserved. The boy, who used to run to greet Ernesto when he arrived from work, now avoided this encounter. He preferred to hide in his room in silence. One afternoon, while preparing dinner, Martha decided that she could not put it off any longer. She needed to talk to Lucas again and try to understand what was really going on. She went upstairs and found him in his room, silently drawing. "Hey honey," he said softly, knocking lightly on the door. "Can I come in?" Lucas murmured in response, quickly covering the drawing with his arm. Martha sighed, realizing how withdrawn he was. "Lucas, we need to talk about what you told me the other day, about Ernesto." She stepped closer, feeling the weight of the conversation that was about to come. Lucas stopped mid-stroke, his hand shaking slightly. "I don't want to talk about it," he whispered, fear evident in his voice. Martha knelt beside him, trying to remain calm. "I know it's hard, my love, but I need to understand what happened. Can you tell me, please?" Lucas shook his head, tears streaming down his face as he struggled for words. The silence between them was heavy, full of uncertainty, but Martha knew she had to be patient. With tears in her eyes, Martha pleaded with Lucas, her voice shaking. "Please, Lucas, I'm your mother, I'm here to protect you. But I need to know the truth." The boy looked at her with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Do you promise you won't get mad?" he asked, his voice low and anxious. Martha answered firmly, "I promise, honey. Nothing you tell me will make me mad at you." Lucas took a deep breath and began to speak in an almost whispering tone. "Sometimes when you're not home, Ernesto comes into my room. He says he wants to play with me, but his games scare me." Martha felt a chill down her spine when she heard this. "What kind of games, Lucas?" she asked, her heart racing. The boy mumbled, avoiding looking at her, and said, "He says it's normal that all parents play like that with their children, but I know it's not true. It makes me feel bad." Martha had to summon all her strength not to scream in anguish. She took a deep breath, trying to remain calm for Lucas's sake. "Why didn't you tell me before, honey?" Lucas looked down, guilt written all over his face. "Ernesto said that if I told you, you would be sad and leave us. He said it would be my fault if our family broke up." Martha hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "None of this is your fault, Lucas. Not at all. You were very brave to tell me." With a shaky voice, Lucas asked, "What are we going to do now, Mommy?" Martha looked him in the eyes, trying to convey reassurance. "We'll get through this, I promise. But I need you to be strong and trust me, okay?" Lucas nodded, clinging to her. "Now," Martha continued, trying to keep her voice steady, "I want you to pack a bag with your clothes and your favorite toys. We're leaving." Lucas, surprised, asked, "Where are we going?" "We're going to Grandma's for a few days," Martha replied. She clenched her fists as she mentioned the rest. "Don't worry about him. I'll take care of it." As Lucas began to pack his things, Martha went to her room and called her mother. "Mom, I need your help. Lucas and I are on our way over. I'll explain everything when we get there." Then she called her best friend, Anna. "Anna, it's me. I need a big favor. Can you come pick up Lucas and me? It's an emergency." Half an hour later, Martha and Lucas were in Anna's car, on their way to her mother's house. Anna asked worriedly, "Are you sure you don't want me to call the police?" Martha shook her head. "No, but I need solid proof. Otherwise, it'll just be his word against ours, and we don't want to stress Lucas out any more than necessary." "What are you going to do?" Martha stared out the window, lost in thought. With a firm and determined expression, Martha thought, "I'm going to get this test no matter what the cost." The days spent at his grandmother's house brought significant relief to Lucas. Little by little he began to smile again and resume his games. Marta watched her son with a mixture of relief and sadness, regretting not having realized the situation sooner. Ernesto called incessantly, asking when they would return. Marta found herself forced to make excuses, claiming that Lucas was sick or that his mother needed help. One afternoon, while Lucas was playing in the garden, Marta sat in the kitchen with her mother. "Mom, I need to tell you something important," Marta said, her voice shaking. Marta's mother looked at her with concern. "What happened, honey? You've been acting strange lately." Marta took a deep breath and began to explain the situation. Her mother listened in silence, her expression changing from disbelief to horror and finally to obvious anger. When Marta finished speaking, her mother exclaimed firmly, "We need to report this immediately." "It's not that simple," Marta replied, exhausted. "I need concrete evidence, otherwise it will just be Lucas's word against Ernesto's, and I don't want my son to go through that kind of stress." "So what's your plan?" her mother asked anxiously. Marta looked at her mother with resolute determination. "I'm going to go home alone and find that evidence." Marta's mother looked at her worried and said, "Are you crazy? This is extremely dangerous." "It's the only way," Marta insisted. "I need you to stay here with Lucas and tell him that you're taking care of an emergency at work." Marta's mother, with a deep expression of apprehension, replied, "I don't like this at all, daughter, but I know I can't stop you. Please be careful." Marta nodded and gave her mother a tight hug before heading out to the garden to say goodbye to Lucas. "You need to stay here for a few days, honey," she said, stroking the boy's hair. "I have something very important to take care of at work, but I promise I'll be back soon." Lucas, with sad eyes, asked, "Are you going to leave Ernesto here?" Marta hugged him tightly and replied, "No, honey. You'll never have to worry about him again. I promise." Later that night, Marta returned home. Ernesto greeted her with a mixture of relief and disapproval. "Finally. I was worried because you didn't answer my calls." Marta forced a smile and replied, "Sorry, I was busy taking care of Lucas and helping my mother. You know how he gets when he's sick." "Where is he now?" Ernesto asked, frowning. "He's still at my mother's house. The doctor recommended that he stay there for a few more days," Marta replied. Ernesto looked worried. "And are you going to stay here?" "Yes, I have to go back to work, but I'll visit him tonight," Marta said, trying to sound calm. Ernesto smiled and leaned in to kiss her, but Marta took a step back. "I'm tired," she murmured. "I think I'll go to bed." Ernesto's face hardened for a moment, but he soon forced a smile. "Sure, get some rest. Tomorrow is another day." Marta spent the night awake, meticulously planning her next move. She knew she had to proceed with caution. A part of her still struggled to believe that Ernesto, the man she had shared the last 2 years with, could be involved in something so horrible. The next morning, Marta got up early and made breakfast as if it were a normal day. Ernesto came into the kitchen, yawning. "Good morning, my dear," he said, moving to kiss her. Marta made an effort not to flinch. "Good morning," she replied, forcing a smile. "Coffee?" Ernesto sat down at the table. "Have you spoken to Lucas? How is he?" Marta lied matter-of-factly. "The doctor said it would be better for him to stay with my mother for a few more days." Ernesto frowned. "Don't you think they're exaggerating? It's just a cold, right?" Marta sat up, controlling the tone of her voice. "The doctor knows what he's doing," she replied, more harshly than she intended. Okay, Ernesto said, raising his hands in surrender. "I just miss him. The house feels empty without him." Marta struggled not to express her relief. Instead, she took a deep breath and replied, "I miss him too, but he'll be back soon." Ernesto nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "By the way, I'll be home late today. I have an important meeting after work." Marta tried to hide her relief at hearing that. "Don't worry," she replied calmly. As soon as Ernesto left, Marta began to search the house. She looked for any sign that might confirm Lucas's story, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Frustrated, she sat on the couch in the living room, wondering what to do next. She needed concrete, unquestionable proof. Suddenly an idea occurred to her. It was risky and dangerous, but it might work. Later that afternoon, after Ernesto contacted her to confirm that he would be late, Marta put her plan into action. She called Lucas. "Hi, honey," she said as she answered the phone. "How are you?" "Mommy?" Lucas replied. "When are you coming?" "Very soon, I promise," said Marta. "But I need you to do me a big favor. It's very important. Can you do it?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "I don't want to," Lucas said finally, his voice shaking. "I know, honey," said Marta, trying to calm him down. "I know it's hard, but it's crucial. I need you to tell Ernesto that you're coming home tomorrow, even if it's not true. Lucas's voice was full of fear. But that's not true, is it? No, honey, you're not coming back yet, confirmed Marta. But I need him to believe it. Can you do that for me? Another silence followed, longer. Finally, Lucas nodded. Okay, mommy, I'll do it. Thank you, my love, said Marta, relieved. Where is he now? Ernesto asked, frowning. He's still at my mother's house. The doctor recommended that he stay there for a few more days, Marta replied. Ernesto looked worried. And are you going to stay here? Yes, I have to go back to work, but I'll visit him tonight, Marta said, trying to sound calm. Ernesto smiled and leaned in to kiss her, but Marta took a step back. I'm tired, she murmured. I think I'll go to bed. Ernesto's face hardened for a moment, but he soon forced a smile. Sure, get some rest. Tomorrow is another day. Marta spent the night awake, meticulously planning her next move. She knew she had to proceed with caution. A part of her still struggled to believe that Ernesto, the man she had shared the last 2 years with, could be involved in something so horrible. The next morning, Marta got up early and made breakfast as if it were a normal day. Ernesto came into the kitchen, yawning. Good morning, my dear, he said, moving to kiss her. Marta made an effort not to flinch. Good morning, she replied, forcing a smile. Coffee? Ernesto sat down at the table. Have you spoken to Lucas? How is he? Marta lied matter-of-factly. The doctor said it would be better for him to stay with my mother for a few more days. Ernesto frowned. Don't you think they're exaggerating? It's just a cold, right? Marta sat up, controlling the tone of her voice. The doctor knows what he's doing, she replied, more harshly than she intended. Okay, Ernesto said, raising his hands in surrender. I just miss him. The house feels empty without him. Marta struggled not to express her relief. Instead, she took a deep breath and replied, I miss him too, but he'll be back soon. Ernesto nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. By the way, I'll be home late today. I have an important meeting after work. Marta tried to hide her relief at hearing that. Don't worry, she replied calmly. As soon as Ernesto left, Marta began to search the house. She looked for any sign that might confirm Lucas's story, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Frustrated, she sat on the couch in the living room, wondering what to do next. She needed concrete, unquestionable proof. Suddenly an idea occurred to her. It was risky and dangerous, but it might work. Later that afternoon, after Ernesto contacted her to confirm that he would be late, Marta put her plan into action. She called Lucas. Hi, honey, she said as she answered the phone. How are you? Mommy? Lucas replied. When are you coming? Very soon, I promise, said Marta. But I need you to do me a big favor. It's very important. Can you do it? There was silence on the other end of the line. I don't want to, Lucas said finally, his voice shaking. I know, honey, said Marta, trying to calm him down. I know it's hard, but it's crucial. I need you to tell Ernesto that you're coming home tomorrow, even if it's not true. Lucas's voice was full of fear. But that's not true, is it? No, honey, you're not coming back yet, confirmed Marta. But I need him to believe it. Can you do that for me? Another silence followed, longer. Finally, Lucas nodded. Okay, mommy, I'll do it. Thank you, my love, said Marta, relieved. Marta picked up the phone again, but this time to dial a different number. Her voice trembling, she said, 911, what's your emergency? As she stared at Ernesto's lifeless body and the photo album scattered across Lucas' bedroom floor, she could barely keep calm. I need help, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think I just killed someone. Before continuing with the story, don't forget to share, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. Now let's continue. The sound of sirens began to break the silence of the night, and Marta sat on the bottom step of the stairs, staring at Ernesto's motionless body. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she held the phone steady, the 911 call still in progress. The operator's voice sounded distant, almost as if it were coming from another world. Ma'am, are you still there? The operator asked. Yes, Marta replied, her voice breaking. The operator continued, the police and ambulance are on their way. Please stay where you are and don't touch anything. Can you do that? Marta nodded automatically, momentarily forgetting that the operator couldn't see her. Yes, she repeated, trying to keep her voice calm. The next few minutes seemed to drag on interminably. Marta couldn't take her eyes off Ernesto, wondering if he was really dead or just unconscious. A part of her wanted to go over to him and check, but the more rational part insisted that she stay put. The sirens got closer and finally stopped in front of the house. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The police arrived, and with the door open, Marta stood up with difficulty, her legs stiff from sitting in the same position for so long. She moved mechanically toward the entrance and opened it. Two police officers stood there, watching her with a mixture of caution and concern. "Were you the one who called 911? One of the officers asked, his expression serious. Marta nodded and pointed down the hallway to show the way. The officers moved quickly, followed closely by the paramedics. Marta stood in the doorway watching the scene unfold before her, as if she were watching a harrowing movie. "He has a pulse," one of the paramedics shouted, his voice thick with urgency. "He's weak but he's alive." Marta's legs wobbled and she had to hold on to the wall to keep from falling. "Ernesto is alive," one of the officers confirmed as he approached her. "I need you to come with me. We have a few questions." Marta followed the officer into the kitchen and sat down in one of the chairs, as the officer positioned himself in front of her. "I'm Officer Ramirez," he introduced himself. "Can you tell me what happened tonight?" Marta took a deep breath, trying to gather her jumbled thoughts. "I found out my partner was abusing my son," she began, her voice thick with anguish. Officer Ramirez frowned. "Abusing? You mean in a sexual way?" Marta nodded, tasting the word bitterly. "I've suspected it for a while, but tonight I finally got some proof." "What kind of proof?" Ramirez asked, his expression growing serious. Marta closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find the right words. "There's a photo album in my room with pictures of my son." Officer Ramirez nodded gravely. "I see. And what happened after you confronted him?" Marta continued. "He tried to run away. We had a struggle and he ended up falling down the stairs." At that moment, another officer came into the kitchen and said, "Ramirez, we found something upstairs that you need to see." Ramirez stood up and told Marta, "Stay here for a moment." She stood in the kitchen, listening to the paramedics and police officers moving about as time seemed to drag on. When silence finally returned, a sudden thought made her heart race. Lucas. She needed to call her mother to make sure Lucas was okay. Marta frantically searched for her phone but couldn't find it. "Where did I leave this?" Officer Ramirez returned, holding Marta's phone. "We found this upstairs. It looks like it was recording," he explained. Marta nodded, relieved. "I was looking for evidence." The officer handed her the phone and continued, "We found the album you mentioned and listened to the recording. Your version of events matches the evidence we've gathered so far." Marta felt a small sense of relief but knew there was still a lot to deal with. "What happens now?" she asked anxiously. "Your partner is being taken to the hospital. He suffered a concussion and some broken ribs but he'll survive. As for you," Ramirez hesitated before speaking, "based on the preliminary evidence, it seems like this is a clear case of self-defense. You'll need to go to the police station to make a formal statement," Officer Ramirez said, and Marta nodded in understanding. "Can I make a phone call before we go? I need to talk to my son." Ramirez nodded but warned, "Sure, but please be quick." With shaking hands, Marta dialed her mother's number. The phone rang 3 times before her mother answered. "Marta, what's going on?" "It's late," her mother's voice sounded worried. Marta's voice cracked a little. "I need to talk to Lucas, please. Is something wrong with him?" There was a brief silence on the other end. "He's sleeping, honey. He's okay." Marta closed her eyes and fought back tears. "Mom, I'll explain everything later. For now, I just need to know he's okay. Can you go check on him for me?" "Sure, just a minute," her mother replied. Marta waited anxiously, holding her breath. She heard her mother's footsteps approaching and the soft sound of a door opening. "He's sleeping soundly," her mother finally said. "He seems peaceful." "Marta, you're scaring me. What's going on?" The concern in her mother's voice was palpable. "I'll explain everything soon, Mom," Marta promised. "But for now, take care of Lucas. Don't let anyone come near him or ask about me or Ernesto. Do you promise me?" "Okay, I promise. But I expect answers soon," her mother replied. "I love you." Marta hung up the phone and looked at Officer Ramirez. "I'm ready," she said, feeling the weight of her words. The drive to the police station passed in a blur. Marta stared out the window of the patrol car, but the city lights seemed like a blur, her mind focused on Lucas. When she arrived at the police station, she was led into a small interrogation room. The gray walls and metal desk gave the room a cold, impersonal feel that made Marta shiver. Officer Ramirez entered the room accompanied by a woman in a business suit. "Ms. Valdez, this is Detective Lopez. She's going to take your statement," Ramirez introduced. Detective Lopez sat across the desk from her, his expression serious but not cruel. "Ms. Valdez, I understand that you've been through a traumatic situation tonight. I need you to tell me everything that happened. Take your time." Marta took a deep breath and began to recount the events. She talked about her suspicions, Lucas's confession, and her plan to gather evidence. Her voice trailed off as she described the photo album, which contained pictures of Lucas. "They were pictures of my son," she said, tears streaming down her face. "How did I not notice this before?" Detective Lopez offered her a tissue and said calmly, "Don't blame yourself, Ms. Valdez. Abusers are often skilled at hiding their actions." Marta went on to tell of the confrontation with Ernesto and the struggle that culminated in him falling down the stairs. "I didn't want to kill him," she finally said. "I just wanted him to stop." Detective Lopez nodded as she took notes. "Based on your statement and the evidence collected at the scene, it appears this is a clear case of self-defense. The district attorney will have the final say on the case," the detective explained. Marta, feeling a weight on her shoulders, asked, "What happens now?" "Well, your partner, Ernesto Morales, is in custody at the hospital. As soon as he recovers, he will be formally arrested and will face child molestation charges. As for you," the detective paused, "for now you are released, but you will need to remain in the city. We may need to call you back to answer more questions." Marta nodded, a feeling of deep weariness setting in. "Can I go see my son now?" she asked anxiously. "Sure," the detective said, "but first it would be good if you had someone to accompany you. It is not advisable for you to be alone at this time." Marta thought for a moment and answered, "Yes, my friend Anna. She knows a little about what is going on." The detective handed Marta the phone and said, "Call her. You can wait here until she comes to pick you up." Half an hour later, Marta was sitting in Anna's car on the way to her mother's house. The silence between them was profound, and Anna, without asking questions, offered a silent, comforting hug. Marta felt immense gratitude for her friend's peaceful presence. As they approached her mother's house, Marta noticed that the lights were still on, even though it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. "Do you want me to come with you?" Anna asked softly. Marta shook her head. "No, it's okay. Thank you for everything. Call me if you need anything, okay?" "Sure," Anna replied, "anytime." Marta got out of the car and walked slowly to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Before she could even ring the bell, the door opened, and her mother greeted her with a look of concern and weariness. "Oh, Marta," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around her daughter. Marta collapsed into her mother's embrace, sobbing uncontrollably as the emotions of the night washed over her. Horror and fear poured out in a torrent of tears. "Lucas is okay, daughter," her mother whispered, stroking Marta's hair as she had when she was little. "You're safe, Lucas is safe too." Finally, Marta managed to calm down enough to go inside the house. She sat at the kitchen table while her mother made a cup of tea. "Lucas is still asleep," her mother informed her, placing the cup in front of Marta. "He didn't hear anything. Now tell me what's going on." Marta took a sip of her tea, allowing the warmth of the drink to calm her for a moment before sharing everything with her mother. As she spoke, Marta watched her mother's expression change, from concern to horror and finally to restrained fury. "You should have done something more drastic with him," Marta's mother said, her voice thick with indignation. Marta was shocked by the statement and gasped. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, the pain visible on her face. "How could someone do this to a child?" Lucas's tears began to form again in Marta's eyes, and she responded with a whimper, "I don't know, Mom. I just don't know." The two of them were silent for a moment, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marta's mother asked, breaking the silence, "What do we do now?" Marta sighed deeply before answering, "I think we need to talk to Lucas, explain what happened, and then—" She paused, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation they faced, thinking about the lawyers, the trials, and how they were going to get through it all. Her mother reached across the table, taking Marta's hand in hers with a comforting gesture. "We'll take it one day at a time, honey, one day at a time. And you won't be alone. I'll be here with you every step of the way." Marta squeezed her mother's hand, grateful for her support. Suddenly, a sound interrupted the moment of calm, small footsteps coming down the stairs. "Mommy?" Lucas's sleepy voice called from the hallway. Marta stood up quickly. "I'm here, honey," she replied. Lucas appeared in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. When he saw Marta, he ran to her, crying, "Mommy!" Marta hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face again. "Oh, my sweet boy," she whispered, kissing Lucas's head. "My brave, precious boy." Lucas looked at her in confusion. "Why are you crying, Mommy? Did something bad happen?" Marta knelt down to his level and with a serious look she said, "We need to talk about something important." Lucas's big brown eyes widened, a visible flicker of fear crossing his face. "It's about Ernesto." Marta's heart sank at the sound of the name. "Yes, honey," she said softly. It's about Ernesto. Her mother, who was standing nearby, asked, "Would you like me to leave you two alone?" Marta shook her head. "No, Mummy. Please stay." They settled on the couch. Lucas nestled between Marta and his grandmother. Marta held Lucas's little hands in hers and said, "Lucas, remember what you told me about Ernesto? About the things he did to you?" Lucas looked down and nodded slowly. "Yes," he replied in a shy tone. "Well, honey," Marta said tenderly, "I want you to know that it was very, very brave of you to tell me all this. You did the right thing. So you believe me?" Lucas asked, his voice calm but with a hint of pain. "Of course I believe you, honey," Marta replied firmly and lovingly. "I will always believe you. I will always believe you, and I deeply regret not realizing this sooner," Marta said sincerely. Her mother looked at her with concern and asked, "What happened, honey? Why are you here so late?" Marta took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Well, honey, tonight I confronted Ernesto. I told him I knew what he was doing." Lucas's eyes widened with fear. "Was he angry? Did he hurt you?" Marta hesitated, searching for the best way to explain. "No, honey, he didn't hurt me. There was an accident. Ernesto fell and hurt himself." Lucas looked at her, fear and hope mixing in his voice. "Is he going to die?" Marta shook her head. "No, honey, he's not going to die. But he's never going to come home again." Lucas was silent for a moment, processing the news. To Marta's surprise, he started to cry. "Oh, my love," Marta whispered, wrapping him in a tight hug. "It's okay now. You're safe." Lucas sniffed and in a sad voice said, "Part of me wanted him to die. Does that make me a bad person?" Marta exchanged a pained look with her mother, who was standing nearby. "No, honey," she said, stroking Lucas's hair. "That doesn't make you a bad person. It's understandable to feel that way after what he did to you. The important thing is that he can't hurt you anymore. You have your mother and grandmother who love you very much and will always be here to protect you." They stayed like that for a while in a silent embrace, until Lucas's sobs subsided. Finally the boy asked, "What happens now?" Marta pulled back a little, looking into his eyes. "Well, honey, a lot of things are going to happen. First, we're going to stay with Grandma for a while. Then we might have to talk to some people about what happened." "Like the police?" Lucas asked, fear returning to his voice. "Yes, maybe the police," Marta confirmed. "But don't worry, I'll be with you the whole time. These people just want to help. We'll also have to talk to the school and some of our friends. But for now, we'll take a few days off from school and then we'll see what we can do." Lucas nodded, yawning. "I think it's time to go back to bed," he said. "Sure, honey," Marta replied. "You can sleep with me." As they walked up the stairs, Marta's phone rang. It was a message from Detective Lopez. "Ms. Valdez, we need you to come to the police station tomorrow and bring your son. The child psychologist will be there to talk to him. Call me if you have any questions." A wave of anxiety washed over Marta as she read the message. The next day promised to be difficult. The next morning, Marta woke up before Lucas and watched him sleep peacefully. She wondered how she would protect him from the challenges that lay ahead, but she knew she needed to be strong for him. Marta went downstairs and found her mother already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning, honey," her mother greeted, handing her a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling today?" Marta sighed deeply, as if she had been hit by a truck, both physically and emotionally. "That's how I feel," she replied. Her mother nodded in understanding. "It's understandable. You've been through so many difficult things and the hardest part is yet to come." Marta then showed her mother the detective's message. "How am I going to explain to Lucas that he needs to talk to the police and tell them the whole truth?" Her mother responded with encouragement. "He's proven to be stronger than we thought. Trust him, he can handle this." Just then they heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Lucas entered the kitchen, still wearing his pajamas. "Good morning, honey," Marta said, giving him a warm hug. "Are you hungry?" Lucas nodded, and they began to eat breakfast together. Marta knew she had to broach the subject. "Lucas, honey, today we need to go somewhere special," she began, trying to sound gentle. "We're going to the police station." Lucas looked at her curiously as he bit into his cereal. "The police station? Why?" Marta replied gently, "Some people there want to talk to you about what happened to Ernesto." Lucas dropped his spoon and some milk sloshed onto the table. "I don't want to go," he said, his voice shaking with worry. "I know, honey, but it's really important," Marta tried to comfort him. "I'll be with you the whole time, I promise." Lucas frowned. "Will they ask me questions?" Marta nodded. "Yes, probably. But there will also be a professional who specializes in helping children deal with difficult situations. He's a psychologist, someone who can help you understand your feelings." Lucas looked confused. Would you talk to him too if I wanted? Yes, I would talk to him too if it would help you feel better, Marta replied. Okay, I will, but I don't like it, Lucas said with a sigh. Marta looked at him with pride. I know, honey, and I'm so proud of you for being so brave. An hour later, they were in the car on the way to the police station. Lucas stared out the window in silence, and Marta wanted to find the right words to comfort him, but she found herself lacking inspiration. When they arrived, Detective Lopez was waiting at the entrance, ready to greet them. At the entrance to the building, Detective Lopez greeted Marta with a, "Good morning, Mrs. Valdez," and then crouched down to speak to Lucas. You must be Lucas. Nice to meet you, he said with a warm smile. Lucas hid behind Marta's legs, visibly nervous. Marta explained, "He's a little anxious." The detective smiled understandingly. That's completely normal. Come on in, I'll take you to Dr. Ruiz. He led Marta and Lucas down a hallway to a colorful office filled with toys. There, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile greeted them. Hello, I'm Dr. Ruiz. And you must be Lucas, she said. Lucas nodded shyly. Would you like to play with me for a while your mother talks to Detective Lopez? Dr. Ruiz offered kindly. Lucas looked to Marta for approval. She gave him an encouraging smile and said, It's okay, honey. I'll be right outside if you need me. Lucas walked into the office and began playing with Dr. Ruiz, while Marta followed Detective Lopez into an adjacent room. Through a one-way mirror, she could see Lucas sitting on the floor, beginning to play with some building blocks under Dr. Ruiz's guidance. Detective Lopez began speaking to Marta. Ms. Valdez, I know this is very difficult, but we need a formal statement from Lucas so that we can move forward with the case against Mr. Morales. Marta nodded. I understand. What do you need to know? Over the next hour, Marta repeated her story in more detail. Detective Lopez took notes and asked clarifying questions to ensure that all aspects were covered. At the end of the conversation, the detective said, One more thing. Mr. Morales was released from the hospital this morning. He is now in police custody and his lawyer has already applied for bail. Marta felt a chill run through her body as she thought of the possibilities. So, can he be released? She asked, her voice shaking. Unlikely, the detective replied firmly. Based on the charges and the evidence we've gathered, it's very likely that the judge will deny bail. But I thought it was important to prepare you for any eventuality. Before Marta could fully process, the door opened, and Dr. Ruiz entered the room with a serene expression. How is Lucas? Marta asked quickly, eager for news about her son. Dr. Ruiz offered a comforting smile. He's a very brave boy. We've talked about what happened, although he's mostly expressed it through play. There are clear signs of trauma, but I believe that with the right support, he'll be able to overcome this. What kind of support? Marta asked, leaning forward, determined to do whatever it took. Regular therapy would be essential at least once a week, Dr. Ruiz recommended. It would be great if you could attend a few sessions as well. Also, maintaining a consistent school routine and encouraging socializing with friends can help Lucas feel like he still has control over his life. Marta nodded, taking in every word. I'll do whatever it takes, she promised. I know you will, Dr. Ruiz continued. And remember, keeping his life as normal as possible will be an important pillar in his recovery. Can I see him now? Marta asked, the anxiety evident in her voice. Sure, he's waiting for you, the doctor replied with an encouraging nod. As Marta entered the room, she found Lucas finishing building a tower of blocks. Hi honey, how are you feeling? She asked softly. Lucas looked up at her, his eyes tired but with a newfound calm. I'm fine, Mommy, he replied in a small but firm voice. That's good, honey, Marta smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. Are you ready to go home? Lucas nodded, but his gaze drifted to the block tower he had built, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Dr. Ruiz, who was with Marta, noticed the look and said, You know, Lucas, you can come back at any time and continue building. Your tower will be waiting for you. The boy gave a small smile. Really? He asked, and Dr. Ruiz nodded. As they left the police station, Marta was overcome with a mixture of relief and anxiety. It was only the first step on a long journey, but at least now they were no longer alone. Where are we going now, Mommy? Lucas asked as they walked toward the car, and Marta, still processing everything, felt that despite the challenges ahead, the worst was over. Lucas looked at Marta with a spark of innocence in his eyes, a light that Ernesto had tried to extinguish. In that moment, Marta made a firm decision. You know what, honey? Let's go get some ice cream and if you want, we can go to the park afterwards. Lucas's face lit up with a wide smile. Do you really want to do this? Marta asked, gently squeezing his hand. It's a beautiful day and the most important thing is that we're together. As they walked towards the ice cream shop, Marta was aware that the road ahead would be full of challenges. There would be exams to face, nights of therapy filled with nightmares and days filled with doubts. However, seeing her son's enthusiasm, debating which ice cream flavor to choose, she felt a spark of hope. They would face each day one step at a time and overcome the difficulties. The sun shone down on them, promising a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, Marta felt that there was hope. The soft jingle of the ice cream shop's bell greeted them as they entered. The place was nearly empty, with an elderly couple in one corner and a group of laughing teenagers in another. "Which flavor are you going to get, honey?" Marta asked, guiding Lucas to the counter. Lucas pressed his nose against the glass, his eyes scanning the colorful tubs of ice cream. "I'll have chocolate and strawberry," he said. "Are you sure? Last time you said strawberry was for babies?" Marta teased, raising an eyebrow. Lucas frowned for a moment, then smiled shyly. "Well, maybe I'm still a little baby." Marta felt her heart soften at the sight of Lucas in such a vulnerable moment. "2 scoops, please," she told the waiter, 1 chocolate and 1 strawberry. As they waited for their ice cream, Marta noticed Lucas looking around nervously. "Is something wrong, honey?" she asked quietly. "What if Ernesto is here?" Lucas asked, his tone worried. Marta crouched down to his level. "Honey, Ernesto can't hurt us anymore. He's in a place he can't get out of, like a prison. It's a place for people who have done really bad things, a real prison." Marta tried to comfort him with a smile, but she knew he wasn't completely at ease yet. "Don't worry about it now, okay? We're safe here." Lucas nodded, but Marta could tell he still wasn't completely convinced. With their ice creams finally in hand, they sat at the table near the window. For a moment, they ate in silence, watching the people passing by on the sidewalk. "Mommy," Lucas said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, my love, ask me anything you want," Marta replied with a loving tone. Lucas picked at his ice cream, avoiding looking at his mother. "Why did Ernesto do those things to me? Did I do something bad?" Marta felt a lump in her throat, as if she had been punched in the stomach. Marta placed Lucas's ice cream in his hands and looked at him lovingly. "Listen, Lucas, none of what happened was your fault. Absolutely nothing. Ernesto is a sick person who did terrible things, and you did nothing to deserve this." Lucas's eyes filled with tears and he replied, "Sometimes when I feel good, it makes me feel bad." Marta had to make a conscious effort to remain calm. "No, honey, it doesn't make you feel bad. Your body is just reacting naturally, but that doesn't justify what he did in any way. He abused your trust and innocence." Lucas sniffed and asked with a worried tone, "What if I end up becoming someone like him when I grow up?" Marta got up from her chair and wrapped her son in a warm hug. "Oh, honey, that's not going to happen. You are a wonderful person with a huge heart. What happened to you doesn't define who you are or who you will ever be." They hugged for a while, ignoring the melted ice cream that was dripping down the table. "You know what?" Marta finally said, pulling away a little to look Lucas in the eye. "I think it would be a good idea to find someone who can help us understand all of this. Someone like Dr. Ruiz." Lucas looked at Marta curiously. "Like Dr. Ruiz?" "Yes, or someone like that. Someone we can talk to about our feelings and who can help us feel better. What do you think?" Marta asked. Lucas thought for a moment and then said, "You're going too, aren't you?" "Sure, my love," Marta confirmed. "We can go together if you want." "Okay," Lucas replied, turning back to his ice cream. "But only if we can go to the park afterwards like you promised." Marta smiled, feeling a small wave of relief. "Sure, honey. A promise is a promise." After they finished eating their ice cream, Marta and Lucas walked to the nearby park. The place was bustling with families enjoying the beautiful weather. For a moment, Marta felt overwhelmed by the normalcy around her. How could the world keep spinning while hers seemed to have been so profoundly shaken? "Look, Mommy," Lucas exclaimed, pointing to the playground. "There are swings free." Before Marta could respond, Lucas was already running toward them. She followed close behind, keeping a watchful eye as he climbed onto one of the swings. "Push me, Mommy," Lucas begged, his eyes shining with a joy Marta hadn't seen in a while. Marta pushed him and watched her son laugh and squeal with excitement. For a brief moment, it seemed like everything was normal again. However, deep down, Marta knew that reality would soon catch up with them. As if the universe was determined to remind her of her new reality, her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a text from Detective Lopez. "Mrs. Valdez, the judge denied bail for Ernesto Morales. He will remain in jail until trial. Call me when you can so we can discuss the next steps." Marta felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. On the one hand, Ernesto would not be able to come near them, But on the other, the legal process was moving forward and soon they would have to face issues they would rather ignore. "Mommy, look how high I am," Lucas shouted, pulling Marta out of her thoughts. "I see you, honey," she replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe not too high, okay? I don't want you to fall later," Marta said as she watched Lucas swing. A little while later, Lucas asked to go to the slide and Marta followed him, sitting on a nearby bench to keep an eye on him. "Excuse me," a voice said next to her. Marta turned to find a middle-aged woman with a welcoming smile. "Is that your son?" Marta's response was immediate. "Yes, why?" "Oh, don't worry," the woman replied with a light laugh. "It's just that my daughter seems to have made friends with him." Marta looked toward the slide and saw Lucas laughing as he played with a girl her age. They were competing to see who could slide the fastest. "Her name is Sophia," the woman continued. "She's usually a little shy, but your son seems to have brought her out of her shell." Marta relaxed a little. Lucas had that positive effect on people. It was one of her charming qualities. "By the way, I'm Elena," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Marta," she replied, shaking Elena's hand. "Do you come here often?" "I don't think I've seen you around here before." "Actually, we're not here often. We're just visiting my mom," Elena commented, smiling. "It's important to maintain those family connections." She didn't seem to notice Marta's discomfort. "We come here almost every day after school. Sophia loves this park," Elena added. Marta nodded, trying to find the words for a casual conversation, but feeling torn between enjoying the moment or feeling guilty about doing so, considering the problems they were facing. "Mommy," Lucas ran toward Marta with Sophia close behind. "Can I play in the sandbox with Sophia?" Marta looked at Elena, who smiled and nodded. "Sure, honey. But where can I see you?" "Okay." The two children squealed in unison before running off to the sandbox. "They're adorable, aren't they?" Elena commented. "At this age, making friends is so easy. I wish we adults could keep that skill." Marta tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. Elena must have noticed Marta's worried expression, because her face changed to one of empathy. "Are you okay? You look like you're worried about something." Marta hesitated. On the one hand, she didn't know Elena well and didn't want to share her struggles with a stranger. On the other hand, she felt so isolated and alone in her struggles that talking to someone was tempting. "It's complicated," she finally admitted. "We're going through a hard time." Elena nodded in understanding. "I understand. We all have our struggles. If you need to talk, I'm here." Just then Marta's phone rang again. It was her mother. "Sorry, I have to take this," Marta said, getting up to walk away. "Don't worry," Elena replied, standing up as well. "I'll keep an eye on the kids." Marta answered the call as Elena walked away. "Mom, what's going on?" "Marta, honey, where are you? I got home and you weren't there." "We're at the park, Mom. We needed some fresh air." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" "Yes, Mom," Marta interrupted, trying to reassure her. "Ernesto is in custody, he can't hurt us. Besides, Lucas needed this. We need this." Marta's mother sighed. I know. It's just that I can't help but worry." Marta glanced at the sandbox where Lucas and Sophia were building a sandcastle. "When will they be back?" "Soon," her mother replied, following Marta's gaze. "Lucas made a friend and they're having fun. Everything's fine." Lucas, in a low, hopeful voice, asked, "Do you think we can have more days like this?" Marta crouched down in front of her son, looking him in the eyes. "I promise we'll do everything we can to have more days like this, my love. Even though things may be hard for a while, we'll always find a way to be happy together, okay?" Lucas nodded and a small smile formed on his lips. "Okay, Mommy." When they arrived at Grandma's house, the smell of dinner greeted them as soon as they opened the door. "We're home," Marta exclaimed. Grandma came out of the kitchen, drying her hands with a cloth. "Finally. I was starting to worry." "Sorry, Mommy," Marta said. "We lost track of time at the park." "Grandma, I made a new friend," Lucas exclaimed, running to hug Grandma. "Her name is Sophia and we built a sandcastle together." Grandma looked at Marta over Lucas's head, her face a mix of surprise and relief. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Let's talk about it while we set the table, okay?" Lucas excitedly helped his grandmother with the preparations, while telling her details of his adventure at the park. Marta, on the other hand, went into the kitchen to have a moment alone and process everything that had happened during the day. She leaned against the counter, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The relief of seeing Lucas happy was mixed with anxiety about the challenges that lay ahead. Her mother's voice made her jump. "Are you okay, honey?" Marta hadn't noticed her mother enter the kitchen. She opened her eyes and tried to smile. Yes, it's been a long day, Marta replied. Her mother came closer and placed a comforting hand on Marta's shoulder. Do you want to talk about it? Marta hesitated for a moment, but then began to talk non-stop. She told her mother about the trip to the ice cream shop, the difficult conversation with Lucas, the encounter with Elena and Sofia in the park, and the message from Detective Lopez. Her mother listened intently, nodding every now and then. When Marta finished, her mother pulled her into a hug. "Oh, my sweet girl," she murmured. "You're being so strong." Marta allowed herself to relax into her mother's embrace, feeling like a little girl for a moment. "Sometimes I don't feel strong about any of this," she confessed. "But you are," her mother insisted, pulling back slightly to look Marta in the eye. "You're handling all of this with a grace and strength that amazes me. And Lucas is doing better because of you." Marta admitted softly, "I'm scared, Mommy. I'm scared that I'm not doing enough, that I'm making the wrong decisions." "Marta, look at me," her mother said firmly. "You're doing everything you can in an impossible situation. There's no manual for this. What really matters is that Lucas feels safe and loved." "You're doing everything you can," Marta's mother said with a soft smile, as Marta felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom. I really don't know what I'd do without you." "That's why I'm here, honey," her mother replied with a loving look. "Now let's go eat dinner. Food always helps clear the mind." During dinner, Lucas continued his animated narration about his day at the park. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Marta and her mother exchanged looks of relief and gratitude at seeing Lucas so happy. Between bites, Lucas commented, "And tomorrow, can we go back to the park? Sofia said she's bringing her warrior dolls." Marta hesitated for a moment before answering. "Honey, we have some important things to take care of tomorrow." Lucas's face fell at that. "We have to see Dr. Ruiz again, don't we?" Marta spoke carefully. "Yes, but we're also going to talk to someone who can help with Ernesto's situation." Lucas, looking down at his plate, pushed his food around without much interest. "I don't want to talk about it," he mumbled. "Ernesto?" Marta felt a pang of pain in her heart at the name. "I know, honey, but it's important. We need to make sure he can never hurt you again." "But you said he's in prison," Lucas protested. "Why do we need to keep talking about him?" Grandma chimed in. "Honey, when someone does something really bad, you have to talk about it a lot to make sure they get punished properly. They deserve it." Lucas frowned and asked, "Is it like when I break a rule and have to be grounded?" Marta couldn't help but smile slightly. "Kind of, but it's much more serious. And after this, can we go to the park?" Marta looked at her mother, who gave a small nod. "You know, if everything goes well tomorrow, maybe we can go to the park this afternoon, but I can't promise anything, okay?" Lucas's face lit up. "Okay." After dinner, while Grandma washed the dishes, Marta took Lucas upstairs to get him ready for bed. As she helped Lucas get dressed for bed, she noticed that he was unusually quiet. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Lucas hesitated for a moment before asking in a small voice, "Mommy, are we going back home?" The question took Marta by surprise. In all the chaos, she hadn't thought much about the old house, the place where the abuse had occurred. "I don't know, honey," she answered honestly. "I don't like that house. It scares me." Marta felt a pang of guilt. She should have thought more about how Lucas felt about the house. "Then we're not going back there," she stated firmly. "We'll find a new place to live, one where you'll feel safe and happy." "Can we live with Grandma?" Lucas asked hopefully. Marta smiled. "We'll see. For now, we'll stay here." "Okay," Lucas said, looking relieved. To Marta's surprise, he hugged her tightly and said, "I love you, Mommy. More than anything in the world." After tucking Lucas into bed and making sure he was comfortable and asleep, Marta retired, feeling a little lighter knowing that despite the hardships, they could still find moments of tenderness and love. Marta walked downstairs and found her mother in the living room, looking through some documents. She sat down next to her on the couch and asked curiously, "What are all these papers?" Her mother sighed before answering. "They're legal documents. I was thinking that maybe we should consider getting a restraining order against Ernesto, just to be on the safe side." Marta felt the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. "You're right. I'll talk to Detective Lopez about this tomorrow. We should also think about hiring a lawyer," she said, trying to process the magnitude of what was being discussed. Her mother continued, "We need someone to represent us, especially you and Lucas, during the trial." The word trial felt strange on Marta's lips. Although she knew it would eventually come to this, hearing the term out loud made it all the more real and frightening. "Yes, honey," her mother said softly, "there will be a trial, and Ernesto will have to answer for his actions." Marta ran her hand over her face, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I know. Part of me just wishes this would all be over, that we could wake up tomorrow and none of this had ever happened. Marta's mother comforted her, placing a comforting hand over hers. I understand, honey. But you know we can't just ignore this. We have to face this for Lucas's sake. You're right, Marta agreed, sitting up straighter on the couch. Do you know a good lawyer? Actually, I do, her mother replied. Remember Patricia, my friend from book club? Her son is a lawyer who specializes in child abuse cases. We could talk to him. Marta nodded, relieved. That sounds good. Could you call him tomorrow? Sure, her mother said. Then, after a moment of silence, she added, Marta, there's one more thing we need to consider. Your job. Marta frowned, realizing what her mother meant. You've been out for several days. I told them it was a family emergency and my boss gave me some time off, but eventually you'll have to go back to work or make a more definitive decision. Panic began to rise in Marta's chest. How am I going to manage Lucas's care, the legal case, and still keep my job? She was overwhelmed by the thought. Her mother sensed her desperation and squeezed Marta's hand firmly. You don't have to decide everything right now, honey. We'll take it one day at a time. Marta tried to calm her breathing. One day at a time, she repeated, seeking comfort in the words. Her mother smiled encouragingly and added, and for today I think you've done more than enough. How about we relax a little? We could watch that show you like. Marta smiled slightly. That sounds good, Mom. Thanks. As her mother made some popcorn and turned on the TV, Marta settled into the couch. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult decisions, but for tonight she allowed herself a brief moment of normalcy. Looking up at the stairs and thinking of Lucas sleeping upstairs, she whispered to herself, one day at a time. We'll get through this one day at a time. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next videos. Big kiss and see you in the next exciting story.